Welcome to Financial Planning Explained. I'm your host, Mike Menninger, Certified Financial Planner, founder and owner of Menninger Associates Financial Planning. Pleased to be joined here today with my immediate left, Nick DeVito, also a CFP, and then all the way to the left, Ryan Keefe, another CFP on staff. What we're doing is we're picking up on this is the second part of talking about, sort of started with New Year's resolutions, but I hate New Year's resolutions. I mean, why create something that you know you're not going to follow? Been there, done that, okay? But really, it's kind of taking a look at how can we start the new year off on the right foot? How does that sound? Yeah. And what we talked about really fundamentally is you want to really understand your financial goals. And in fact, writing them down makes you more accountable for it, okay? To be able to look back and say, hey, you know what? I didn't do these things that I said I was going to do, all right? And then secondly is organizing your finances. Organizing it also does two things. It helps you understand what the heck is going on. And I remember the very first time I organized my finances. I was shocked, surprised, but pleased when I was done, because you know what? It was out of control. And once I pulled it all together, I knew the situation that I was in, but now I felt I was in control of it.
Well, yeah, the unknown is daunting, no matter whether that be finances or anything in life. When you don't understand something or you don't know something, it's very daunting. So that first step of wrapping your arms around it can really help it seem a little bit more manageable.
Correct. So in the first episode, what we talked about were the first 3 of the 6 areas of financial planning. So we'll talk 6 areas of financial planning being cash management, tax planning, risk management, which is insurance planning, then investment planning, retirement planning, and estate planning. We spoke about the first 3 topics in the first episode, and now we're going to talk about investment planning, retirement planning, and estate planning in this episode, but also recognize that all of these are very integrated. You know, you can't really do one without it impacting all of the others. You can't do anything else without it impacting what you're doing here. So it's important to understand. And again, we're all about understanding. Yeah. You know, so when it comes to investment planning, really, it comes back to risk tolerance again. Yeah. You know, talk about risk. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the single biggest component of risk is going to be your time horizon for your assets. So understanding what and kind of going back to the goals of understanding what your goals are for those assets. If the goal for your 401k has a longer time horizon on it, you can be a little bit more risky. If you're saving for a house and you're planning on buying a house in the next 1 to 2 years, well, you don't want to take any risk with that money. So the first step of understanding that risk tolerance is understanding the time horizon. Once you have the time horizon, then it's more of a personal preference. Right. That long-term time horizon, that's when it comes down to what are you comfortable with? Are you okay if your 401k goes down 20% a year and you know, okay, it's a long-term investment, it's going to come back over the long haul. Over the long haul, I'm better off for being a little bit more risky because I can achieve a higher long-term rate of return. So first component is time horizon. Second component is personal preference. And that's kind of understanding that about yourself is a key first step.
And the time horizon also, we talked about in the first episode, was the emergency reserves. That should never be invested in anything other than purely safe, because what's the time horizon? If you needed money, that is the first place you're going.
Yep. Correct. Exactly.
And I think one of the key components of knowing your risk tolerance is understanding what you're actually invested in.
Right.
We see a lot of people come in with their 401ks and they don't know what they picked. They just kind of went with either a target date fund or an S&P 500 fund, which is not wrong, but we tend to see these target date funds tend to be heavy international, heavy equities, low on the bond fixed income side, which if you're gearing up for retirement in the next year or two, we have a significant downturn in the market that could leave you exposed to potential liability there. So you really want to understand what you're invested in and see if it's appropriate for you and your age. And
because obviously things change over time. Sometimes people set and forget, and they can do that in the form of an aggressive investment. When they were in their 20s and 30s, they picked these investments, they're aggressive, and it was great for them. And to Ryan's point, understanding where you're at currently and making the adjustments that you need to make is very important.
Well, the thing that I've seen a number of times over the years is that the way people select their investments is they take a look at the listing of all of the investments, and they look at the ones that did the best over the last 1 to 3 years, right?
Yeah.
This one did 35, this one did 30, and they take those. And what are they effectively doing is they're taking, not knowing, and use my basket of fruit, they're just picking 5 different apples and throwing them in, and they all happen to be this large cap growth fund, this technology fund. Why do you think they all have these really high returns when in fact they thought they were building a balanced portfolio by having 5 different company names?
Yeah.
But in fact, they're investing in the same thing, and we say, live by the sword, you die by the sword.
And to your point, one thing we always talk about to our clients is the importance of diversification.
Correct.
You want to be diversified across asset classes, caps, so large, small, and mid cap. And I think, and we see this oftentimes with people who have their own company stock in their 401k, or they get options and RSUs and fun stuff like that, is sometimes they can be very over leveraged in their own company stock. We met with someone a few months back, and he works for a large company, and 50%, maybe even more. I mean, his whole 401k was in company stock, plus he had options on the outside of that. So I think people don't necessarily realize the risk that they run with that. And it doesn't even have to be the company you work for. Being over leveraged in one individual holding is never a good thing. It can be, I shouldn't say never a good thing. It can be a good thing when it's going up.
Oh, yeah.
But if something happens to that one company, you're putting yourself at higher risk.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas if you're diversified and you're using mutual funds and ETFs, if something happens to one of those companies in your mutual fund, it's not bringing down the whole fund. And you're
well, and I had the exact example of that. I had a client, and you referenced 50%. He had $880,000 in his 401k and all that stuff, and out of that 850 was company stock.
Yep.
Okay, all in one company stock. Now, mind you, it was a blue chip stock, but we've also learned with blue chips that anything can happen to one particular company and knock it out. And
it could even be out of that company's control. I mean, there was a company a number of years ago that there was bad press about them. It turned out not to be true, and the stock never recovered. And
Right.
it was nothing to do with the company itself. It was an accounting error, and it cost that company, and they never fully recovered. So just be careful with that, is what I would say.
that's all.
Be cautious, be mindful of it. It's okay to have some individual holdings. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying being over leveraged in one individual holding is a risk.
so the other thing too, we talked about this also, was understanding. We talked about understanding your benefits, but now understanding your company plans. And there are a lot of plans out there that have stock options, RSUs, and or employee stock purchase program. It's really important to understand if your company has these programs, they're probably very, very good. And it's a function of understanding what you have.
I was talking to someone just last week, works for a company that we're very familiar with. We have clients with that work at that company, and I was asking her about her employer benefits. I said, have you looked at your employer benefits? I know that you have an ESPP available to you. I know there's stock options. She said, no, I don't really understand them. I know I should, but I haven't really looked into them yet. And I said, I would highly recommend you look into them, because oftentimes companies will offer very favorable benefits, and it's up to you to kind of take that step, because they don't necessarily push it too hard, but take advantage of what's available to you, because we're all about maximizing efficiency, and a lot of those benefits available to you help you do that and will set you up better in the long term. And I think the first step, once again, it kind of goes, we've talked about this whole time, getting your arms around it and understanding it is that first step, because once you understand it, it's not so daunting. You're, okay, why would I not do this?
Right.
And some companies that offer, plans like restricted stock units, that's what's referred to as a cashless exchange, where they just kind of, they sell shares to cover the taxes. You see it on your pay stub, but if you're not reviewing your pay stub, you're not really looking for it. And we've had clients that have had pockets of money in company stock that they never even knew about. So review those plans and know what you have.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a funny story.
Yeah.
$135,000 in company stock, and they didn't even know it. We found it. Just zipping through. Hey, what's that? Like, I don't know. It's the RSUs. I mean, basically what's happening is they weren't getting, it would just show up on their pay stub, but it didn't really show up in the bank.
Yep.
So it was just kind of funny. So he liked me that day. But yeah, it's really understanding all of the different plans that you have available. But we've come across them with people have stock options and they had no idea that they were going to expire. They expire, basically you could be losing tens of thousands of dollars just because you didn't know it.
Yeah.
And that's silly.
I was going to say, similarly to that, if you're thinking of leaving a company and you have RSUs, stock options, whatever it may be, that are vested or unvested, understanding how you leaving impacts that. And if you have to wait till March and you get X number of options vested or X number of RSUs vested, well then wait till March if you can. So going back to understanding your benefits and understanding what you have available to you will always set you up better in the long run.
And actually, as a additive to that is that if I know that I have RSUs and all this vesting in March, and it's worth, call it $20,000, and I'm interviewing with another company and they really want me, I'm going to say, look, I'm losing $20,000 by leaving now. Yeah. That may be able to help you negotiate a better deal.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, the other thing about understanding these is every plan that you have at work, 401k plan, employee stock purchase plan, pension plan, stock options, RSUs, they all have the document called the summary plan description, the SPD. It's not a hidden document. It is a document that each company is required to be able to provide to all of its employees. Sometimes you might be able to get it going through your 401k provider, but the fact of the matter is that your HR people should have that, and we encourage you to take a look at it. Okay, it might be a little bit daunting because I hear summary plan description. My first knee-jerk reaction is executive summary, which is usually 2 to 3 pages. I've seen summaries plan descriptions at 115 pages.
Yeah. Not much of a summary.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's not quite of a summary. So, if you need help with it, just let us know or talk to somebody who does know. But just know that the rule book exists for all companies.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So next, retirement planning, which really, in some regards, is a subset of investment planning, but not really. So the retirement planning is just taking a look again what your goals and objectives are, and you're accumulating assets and then distributing assets. But you want to be looking at what are your goals? When are you retiring? Mm-hmm. Okay, if it's not for 20 years, that's one thing. If it's a few years from now, there's a whole lot of things that you really ought to be getting organized. Mm-hmm. Understanding what your goals are, understanding what your cost of living is. That is the single largest impact on your success in retirement is knowing and understanding your cost of living.
Well, just showing people, we run retirement income models for people all the time, and just showing them the difference of $1,000 a month, what that does to their long-term retirement plan, people are shocked by it. And it's not hard to get $1,000 more in expenses a month when you're retired. You don't have as much to do. Work's not getting in the way. You can do a little bit more. So I think really understanding that cost of living, and I think what we often encourage people to do is practice retirement before they retire. Practice living on that dollar amount that we discussed and seeing if it's really achievable. And if not, then we may have to adjust the goals a little bit and say, okay, what's more important to you? Do you want to live on X amount of dollars a month, or do you want to retire at age 60?
Right.
Because if you want to live on X dollars a month, you're not going to be able to retire at age 60. So understanding that cost of living, practicing retirement is very key. That's
a great way to finish this segment, and what we'll do is we'll pick up a little bit on this because there's still more to talk about on the retirement planning side. So stay tuned. We'll be back with you in just a few moments.
Do you keep up regularly with your investments? Where exactly are your hard-earned dollars going? Are you financially prepared for an emergency?
I'm Mike Menninger, founder of Menninger Associates Financial Planning. We believe that education and knowledge are powerful, and we want our clients to understand why we are making the recommendations that we make. It's your money, and you deserve to know where it's going, because it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. So call us today to discuss your financial concerns. Welcome back to Financial Planning Explained, and we're picking up on we're talking about retirement planning. These are some of the things that, not so much a New Year's resolution, but things that you should be really thinking about and trying to, if you wanted to organize yourself. If your New Year's resolution was to organize your finances, this is what we're helping you do. There you go.
Yeah.
So we talked about the retirement planning, and Nick really brought up an extraordinarily valuable point as we were closing out the first segment, is truly understanding your cost of living, which goes back to our cash management discussion of budgeting, not as much budgeting, but you get the apps, you understand where you're spending your money. What that does is that enables you to be able to figure out, okay, what can I give up in retirement? So we had one recently. We're taking a look at their pay stubs, and we added up all the money that they brought in income. And they were spending $17,000 a month.
Yep.
And they're like, no way. I'm like, well, show me otherwise.
Yeah.
And so the beauty of that is most people aren't aware of how much they spend. And to your point also, practice. So what's good about the retirement planning is running models to say, I like to start with how much are you taking home today? And if you can live on that in retirement, we're in good shape, right? I mean, comparing what your retirement goals are versus today, okay? But if you can't do that, then it reverts back to understanding what you can afford to live on. And that, again, to your point, is practice. And it's a comment we make to all our clients that are a year to 2 years away. We're like, you know what? You want to live on $7,000 a month? Let's prove you can do it.
Yeah. I mean, I have a client that I'm working with, and I was working with the last quarter. She would like to retire in the fall of this year. And she told me what her cost of living is, and I said, I said, it's great that you went through this exercise, but the numbers aren't adding up in terms of what's coming in your bank account, what your savings account has looked like over the year. I don't necessarily think it's this, but here's what we're going to do. If you want to retire in fall, that's great. You can do that if your true cost of living is what you told me it was. But going back to what I said earlier, showing her the difference, I added just an extra $500 a month and then $1,000 extra a month. What that did to her long-term plan, she was shocked. And that's when I came back to her and I said, look, I really want you to drill down, practice for these next 9 months, and let's see where we're at.
Yep.
We'll see.
Yeah, I know.
I don't have an answer for you right now, but we'll see.
Well, so the other thing about retirement planning, getting away from that and looking at it as your benefit at work is, and we've had episodes on this, and we would encourage you to go, the question of do I contribute to the traditional 401k or to the Roth 401k? And that is, once again, an investment planning, retirement planning, and tax planning question all combined, but it really boils down to more so of a tax planning question as to what's my income tax bracket today and what is my projected income tax bracket going to be in retirement when I'm drawing the assets. And something that I've said, if you're married and you're making less than $400,000, the odds are you're probably in a lower tax bracket today than you will be in retirement. But there's so many caveats with that statement, I'm afraid to even point it out. But it's something to really, truly understand. Am I better served contributing to the traditional versus the Roth? But when we talked about the summary plan description, you're really going to want to understand the rules of your company match. I cannot begin to tell you how many people we meet who are blowing their company match.
For a variety of reasons.
Correct.
It could be that they're not contributing enough to get the full match. It's free money. If someone offers you free money, you take it. Okay? So whether it's not contributing enough, whether it be they're contributing too much, too fast, it's a match. And oftentimes you will have to be contributing every paycheck to receive the full match. So what we'll have people do is jam it in the beginning of the year, and then by August, they're not contributing anymore. And if you're contributing 0%, how much is your company matching?
Let's define that. It's not that we tell people to do this.
Yeah,
we observe that they're doing it.
So
we don't tell people to do that.
We don't tell people to do that. No, absolutely not. If they're contributing 0% for 3 months out of the year, that means their company may also be contributing 0% for 3 months out of the year. Also, going back to what Mike said, understanding how your plan works, sometimes they don't match catch-up. So if you're over the age of 50, there's a special catch-up provision where you can contribute more to your retirement accounts. Sometimes employers don't match that. So if you've exhausted your regular contribution through August and then the rest of the year is going to be your catch-up, they may not match that. So it goes back to understanding your plan, looking at that summary plan description. Also, oftentimes people don't necessarily understand what a vesting requirement is. If your company's matching, sometimes what they'll have is a vesting requirement, meaning how long do you have to be with a company for you to, if you were to leave, for you to take that match with you. And that could be for other benefits as well. Vesting is not just with the 401k, but specifically what we're talking about is 401k. Say you have to be with a company, it could be a 3-year cliff where once you're with a company for 3 years and you were to leave, that match that they gave you, you can take with you. Now, just remember, your contributions are always going to be vested, so you're always going to be able to walk away with what you contribute. It's really just that company match that I'm talking about.
Right. Exactly. And it's all good. You just got to know it, because it's remarkable how many people we come across who leave money on the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and then last is estate planning. And I know Ryan loves this so much. So estate planning, we've done plenty of episodes on this, and we teach this down at Temple, et cetera. The four basic components of the estate planning are your wills, your power of attorney, medical power of attorney, and whether or not you decide to use trusts. Okay. Well, the will, again, defines where my assets go, but really it only defines those assets that are held in your name only. Everything that comes out is driven by beneficiaries, which is if you have a joint account or you have beneficiaries named on your insurance policies, your 401k, IRA, pensions, you name it. Okay.
The will, one thing to add to that is the will also can determine who takes care of your young children. So one of the first things we ask young couples that come in with children, or any couples that come in and they have children that are under the age of 18, one of the first questions we ask, do you have wills in place?
Right.
Because it is very important. It's important for everyone to have a will, but especially when there's children involved, we always ask the very obvious question, who do you want to make the decisions about who takes care of your children? Do you want to decide, or would you like the state to decide?
Right.
And it's always a resounding, I want to decide. Are you kidding me? If you don't have a will, you're not making that decision.
We can't encourage enough. If you don't have a will, we're not here to scare you. But to be honest with you, when I meet with a client and I see what they have going on and I see that they don't have a will, it makes me scared.
Yeah.
And, it just, they're almost running naked without a will. And, we make nothing on wills. I mean, I've seen it enough times, unfortunately, where people die without a will, and it creates an incredible problem.
And not even just from the standpoint of the state deciding, but it can also, having your ducks in a row with estate planning before you pass is very important, because the last thing you want to do is for it to be a headache for your family. And that can also go back to being organized. Having a document or some place where someone can go to see all that you have going on, so they don't have to chase down the financial institutions, they don't have to try to figure out where all your various accounts were, is very helpful. Furthermore, the last thing you want is your family fighting.
Yes.
I mean, and we've seen it can tear families apart. I'm sure many of you have either experienced that firsthand, know of stories like that. So being organized, having everything set up can help mitigate that. It's obviously not going to solve every single problem, but it can certainly help mitigate that.
Yeah, and we actually work with a company and every company has their kind of version of this, but they call it their family love letter. And basically it's usually the parents put everything down into one document. So where are the wills? Where can I contact the financial advisor that we work with? The insurance policies that are held, like where they are and how to contact them, and it makes it all nice and neat, like you said, organized. And it can create a giant sigh of relief when you have something like that available. I know a lot of our clients, if they were to pass away, their children would be calling us to say, "Hey, what are the next steps?"
Right.
Yep.
Right, and since you really are excited to talk about reviewing your beneficiaries, why don't we have that discussion again, Ryan?
Yeah, so it is very, as I said in the last episode, very important to review your beneficiaries pretty routinely. We've seen clients that come in and, the ex-spouse of, a decade plus is still the primary beneficiary on their insurance policies, on their, retirement accounts, investment accounts. So you really want to make sure that the money is going where you intend it to go. And more on that point, every beneficiary you can have is either per capita or per stirpes. Per capita being, it's going to go to the designated beneficiaries evenly. So if you have 3 children, one predeceases you and then you die, instead of it going 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, it now goes 50-50 of those other 2 beneficiaries. Or it could be per stirpes, where if one person predeceases, then it would just go to their descendants, and it's still evenly split as 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, at least amongst those families.
And it varies from family to family. They may have 2 of their children have kids, and they say we want it to go down, and then they may have a 3rd child who's divorced, or has no children or whatever, and they may say, hey, I want their share to go evenly to the other children. So, it's just understanding. Again, we keep going back to understanding the rules of the game and knowing how they're applying to you and making sure that you're doing it right. Not even right, there's no right. Doing it the way you want to do it is really what it boils down to.
And just to kind of circle back around, I know you started to touch on it and we got a little sidetracked, was those basic estate planning documents. So we kind of talked about what the will does. We referenced powers of attorney, both durable and medical. So just to kind of explain what that is, durable power of attorney will allow someone to act on your behalf and make decisions for you should you become incapacitated. And that's generally, we're talking about like financial decisions, calling banks on your behalf, paying your bills, stuff like that, that if you were to become incapacitated, your power of attorney can handle that for you. Now, I don't know if any of you out there have ever tried to call a financial institution on someone else's behalf. If you don't have that power of attorney, they're not talking to you.
That is correct.
It doesn't necessarily matter if you're a spouse, child, whatever that may be, they're not going to talk to you. So getting that document in order is very important. And then the medical power of attorney is the same thing, except for medical decisions. If you become incapacitated, your medical power of attorney can make those medical decisions for you. Once again, they are not entitled to that right. Even if you are a spouse, you're not actually by law entitled to that right to make those decisions. Then you have your living will, which is often packaged with the medical power of attorney, referred to as the advanced medical directive. The living will is going to be deciding whether or not to pull the plug if you're in that state. So once again, we talked a little about earlier, but making the decisions easy for your family, making things simpler for them so there's no fighting or anything like that. That's what that helps to do. And then you have trusts, which not everyone needs trust, but they can be a great tool to use as a part of an estate plan.
Thank you. Well, so that was basically the 6 areas and things that we want you to take into consideration. And what was the ultimate theme all the way throughout? Be organized, understand your goals and objectives, and know what you're dealing with, okay? And with that, education and knowledge are powerful, which is really one of our mantras, which is why we have this show. So thank you very much for joining us. We hope that you learned something in each of these 2 episodes, and we'll see you next week.